The slippers were still by the bed. That's how I knew I wasn't ready to leave. Not really. Not after losing the woman who'd been my compass for 42 years. But grief has a strange way of making silence deafening, and kindness feel like oxygen. When my daughter asked me to move in, I said yes. I sold the house, boxed up my life, and chased the only light left, my grandchildren. But that light turned cold fast. The locks, the rules, the quiet looks exchanged over soup. You're not a guest, you're a burden. They didn't know what they started. What I did next shocked even me. And it all began the night they left me with no food and no keys. After she passed, the silence was the first thing that hit me. Not just quiet, the kind that hums in the walls and settles in your bones. It wasn't just the absence of her voice or the way she used to hum while folding laundry. It was everything. The way the house stopped breathing. The way my coffee stayed full and cold. The way I could walk from one end of the home to the other and not find a single reason to stop. She had been sick, fast and ruthless, the kind of illness that leaves no room for plans. One day, it was a lump. 8 months later, hospice. I was there through all of it. Every appointment, every second of the chemo, every hour spent holding her hand when she had nothing left to say. I don't regret a moment of it. But when it ended, when her slippers stayed by the bed and her side of the sink stayed dry, I stopped knowing what to do with myself. Grief doesn't just take the person. It takes the routine, the purpose. I couldn't eat, couldn't sleep. I wasn't living. I was just surviving in the shell of a life that used to feel full. Friends brought casseroles for the first week. My pastor came by once with a prayer book and a hug. Then the phone stopped ringing. Even the cat next door quit showing up. I was 68 and felt like I was already fading. My daughter called every now and then, checking in. Her husband didn't, but I never expected him to. Eventually, she suggested I come live with them, said it might help to be closer to the grandkids, something to keep me busy. I hesitated. I didn't want to be a weight. But the silence in that house had grown too heavy, so I agreed. I packed what little I had left, sold the house, walked through every room one last time, touching the walls like they could hold on to her memory for me. The drive to their place felt long and strange. I kept expecting to look over and see her adjusting the radio or asking about lunch, but the passenger seat stayed empty. When I arrived, there was no big welcome. He stayed on the porch, watching as I lifted my own suitcase. She gave a quick hug. The kids offered polite hellos before drifting back to their screens. It felt like I had stepped into someone else's world. Big, clean, cold. The kind of clean that doesn't come with comfort. They showed me to the basement. Finished, they said. Neat, sure, but no windows. Concrete floors, a futon, a mini fridge in the corner, no kitchen, just a bathroom tucked off to the side. Before I could settle in, he handed me a key, said it was for the bathroom, mentioned something about keeping things organized. I didn't question it, not yet. I figured maybe this was just their way. Structured, boundaries, fine. That night, I lay on the futon staring at the ceiling. I thought of our bedroom, the way she used to curl into my side even in her sleep, the way her hair smelled like lavender no matter how sick she got. I missed that smell more than anything. The basement smelled like detergent and old air. But I told myself, this was the start of something new, that being near my grandkids would bring some light back, that I could find small joys again, maybe help with school pickups, cook dinner now and then, read bedtime stories. I just wanted to feel useful. I had no idea how quickly that hope would begin to shrink, not in an explosion, but slowly, quietly, like steam slipping out of a kettle with no whistle, and I hadn't even seen the worst of it yet. The first morning, I woke up with a stiff back and the kind of ache that reminds you you're not young anymore. That futon felt like it had been built more for short naps than long-term living. Still, I got up early. Years of habit. I figured I'd make coffee, maybe help get breakfast started, offer to drive the kids to school, be part of the routine. I climbed the basement stairs quietly, sock-footed, trying not to make noise. The house was already awake. She was at the stove, stirring something slow and quiet. He was at the table, tapping away on his laptop. I said good morning, stepped toward the pantry, and that's when he looked up. Going somewhere? His voice wasn't angry, just flat, like I'd wandered where I shouldn't. I gave a little laugh, thinking he was joking. I hadn't even opened the door yet. We just prefer if you ask first. That's what he said, straight-faced, eyes already back on the screen. I froze, hand still on the handle, not because of what he said, but how he said it. Like this wasn't new, like I should have known. She didn't look up, just kept stirring. The silence stretched, then she spoke, still facing the pot. He's right. You're not a guest. You're a burden. That word cut through everything. Not loud, not angry, just calm. Final. Like it had already been discussed and decided. I didn't say anything. I just nodded and went back downstairs. My hands were shaking. That word kept echoing. Burden. I'd spent my life working 2 jobs, paying bills on time, coaching soccer when my knees were still good, showing up every time someone needed me. I'd driven her to every asthma appointment, covered tuition when scholarships fell short, walked her down the aisle, paid for the cake, never once asked for anything in return. And now, I was... this? From that day forward, I kept my head down, stayed in the basement, ate what I could afford to order on my phone. Nobody offered dinner. Nobody asked how I was doing. Sometimes they texted to ask for help. Could I grab the kids from school? Fold some towels? I always said yes, even when he rolled his eyes because I folded them wrong. Once I left my shoes by the door, neatly lined up. He asked if I could keep them in my area because the kids were tripping. Another night, she asked if I could cut down on the walking noises after dark. I'd gone upstairs to use the bathroom twice, wearing socks. Apparently that was too much. I started to feel smaller each day, like I was taking up air that didn't belong to me, like I was an echo they were trying to ignore. I told myself this was temporary, that things would settle, that maybe grief had made me sensitive. But deep down, I knew better. They didn't want me there. They wanted what I represented to disappear. The reminders, the messiness of aging, the shadow of death. Still, I held on. For the kids. For some sliver of hope. Maybe I just misunderstood. Maybe they were stressed. Maybe grief had left all of us raw. But the truth was already settling in. I had left my home, my memories, and every ounce of comfort I knew. I had hoped to find warmth again. What I got instead was a key to the bathroom, a mini fridge in a basement, and the quiet confirmation that love doesn't always mean acceptance. And this was just the beginning. I tried to adjust, told myself this was just a transition. Maybe I was expecting too much. Maybe I needed to give it more time. I stayed out of their way, kept the basement clean, answered when asked. I tried not to ask for anything. The days started blending together. I'd wake up sore, scroll on my phone, wait for a chance to feel needed. Most of the time, I didn't leave the basement unless they needed something. Not once did they invite me to join them for dinner. I could hear them upstairs, laughter, dishes clinking, the sound of a full house. I was just below it, existing quietly. It wasn't the cold or the futon that hurt most. It was the absence. I became someone they managed around. Background noise. One morning, I offered to cook breakfast for the kids. Just pancakes. Something simple. He told me they were trying to instill structure and didn't want to break routine. I wasn't part of the routine. I was just a potential disruption. That word burden started to take root. I replayed it constantly. I thought maybe I'd misheard. Maybe she didn't mean it that way. But every small gesture confirmed it. One evening, I asked if I could join them for a family vacation they were planning. I said I'd pay my own way. I just wanted to be part of something. He looked at me, then looked at her. She didn't speak. He did. We need some nuclear family bonding time. I nodded, smiled even. But inside, something cracked. I realized they didn't just want space. They wanted separation. They were going to Myrtle Beach for 5 days. Before they left, I offered to keep an eye on the house. Water the plants, bring in the mail. He shrugged. You'll be here anyway. That Saturday morning, they packed the car. I waved from the porch. No one waved back. Before they left, he came down to the basement. He looked casual, like he was just doing me a favor. He unhooked the car keys from the wall. Just a safety thing, he said. Don't want you getting lost. I asked if I could at least go to the store. He smiled. We stocked your fridge. When the door slammed and the car rolled away, I opened that mini fridge. A bottle of mustard, half a bottle of flat water. That was it. I climbed the stairs, tried the pantry, padlocked. I checked the trash, out of habit, 2 untouched loaves of bread, a full rotisserie chicken, thrown away before they left. I stood in the kitchen, alone, surrounded by the smell of a meal I wasn't allowed to eat. And for the first time in months, I wasn't just sad. I was angry. This wasn't forgetfulness. This was deliberate. Everything I'd done, every sacrifice, every sleepless night rocking her through asthma attacks, every bill paid on time, every graduation, wedding, emergency handled without complaint, it all meant nothing now. I had become disposable. I didn't plan what I did next. It just happened. I went into the office. He always bragged about his home vault, always showing it off like it made him someone. I knew the code. Wedding year, jersey number. I'd seen him punch it in once while I grabbed the mail. Inside, there wasn't much. A couple of watches, some petty cash, a loaded handgun in a case. I didn't touch the weapon. I took $300 in 20s, that's all. I left a note. You took the keys. You locked the food. I'm not your hostage. I'm not your child. I'm not your burden. Then I called a cab. Paid in cash. No one saw me leave. I checked into a cheap motel. The room smelled like smoke, but the bed was warm, and the burger I ordered tasted better than any meal I'd had in months. I even had a beer. For the first time in a long time, I slept through the night. When I woke up, I called a lawyer. I didn't know exactly what I was going to do next, but I knew one thing for sure. I would never go back. There's something strange about freedom after being boxed in. Even at that old motel with stained curtains and a mattress that sank in the middle, I felt more human than I had in months. No locked doors, no sideways looks, no walking on eggshells just to heat a bowl of soup. That morning, I sat on the edge of the bed, burger wrappers on the nightstand, the dull hum of traffic outside, and just breathed. I didn't cry, I didn't rage. I just breathed, like I hadn't in ages. When I called the lawyer, I kept it simple. Told him I needed someone smart, discreet, and ready to help me disappear, legally. He asked some questions, but didn't flinch. Said he'd handled situations like mine before. Told me grief makes people vulnerable, and sometimes those closest to us weaponize that vulnerability. That's when I remembered what she'd told me before she passed. In one of her clear moments near the end, she grabbed my hand and whispered something that didn't make sense until now. Set something aside. Just in case. Don't trust everyone. Back then, I thought it was the pain talking. But she had seen something I hadn't. I had followed her advice. Quietly tucked away a portion of her life insurance, about $140,000, into an account only I knew about. Enough to start over. Enough to keep my dignity if things ever went south. And now, they had. I started looking at rentals, but everything felt temporary. I wanted something stable, something mine. That's when I found a small duplex on the edge of town. Modest, worn, but clean. 1 unit for me. One I could rent out, or maybe offer to someone who actually needed a second chance. The deal closed faster than I expected. I paid in cash, changed the locks, slept on the floor the first night with a blanket and a sandwich from the gas station, and still felt better than I ever had in that basement. The second unit stayed empty for a while, until I met her, a woman with tired eyes and 2 quiet boys clinging to her sides. I saw them at a local pantry waiting in line for canned goods and powdered milk. Her shoes were worn, her jacket was thin, but her posture was strong. I offered her the unit for $1 a month until she got back on her feet. She stared at me like I was speaking a different language. Then she cried quiet, shaking tears, and said no one had ever done something kind for her. That moment changed something in me. I wasn't just escaping anymore. I was rebuilding, not just my life, but my sense of worth. Every time I helped those boys with homework, or fixed a leaky faucet, or brought home a pizza for all of us to share, I felt purpose again. For weeks, it was peaceful. I started every morning with a cup of real coffee on the front porch, birds chirping overhead, the sun rising slow and steady. Sometimes the boys would join me, asking questions about old war movies or how to build birdhouses. I hadn't laughed that much in years. Then one morning, I saw it. A gray SUV parked 5 houses down, tinted windows, familiar shape. It didn't stay long, just sat there for a while, then rolled away. 2 days later, I got a letter. No return address. Inside was a photo, me and the boys sitting on the porch, smiling, hands covered in wood glue. Someone had written across it in thick black marker, "You replaced your grandkids with trash." That night, my tires were slashed. The camera I hadn't installed yet? I regretted that immediately. I knew then this wasn't over. They hadn't let go. They had just switched tactics. Now it was anger, spite, retaliation. But this time, I wasn't trapped in their basement. I wasn't asking permission to eat. I had my own keys, my own walls, and a reason to fight. They thought they had seen the last of me. They had no idea what was coming. I used to think freedom meant walking outside whenever I wanted or having the TV remote to myself. But it's more than that. It's peace. Peace of mind. Peace in knowing no one is watching you with judgment. Peace in knowing you don't have to earn the right to exist. That first week in the duplex, I found myself smiling at the smallest things. The smell of fresh coffee, the sound of the floorboards creaking under my own steps, even folding laundry without someone correcting me. I realized how many pieces of myself I had given away over the years, little sacrifices that felt small at the time, but left me hollow in the end. I didn't just run from a locked pantry. I ran from a version of myself that accepted being invisible, and for once, I was building something for me. Lisa and her 2 boys, as I later came to know them, started to feel like neighbors from another lifetime, the kind that knew struggle intimately and carried it with quiet grace. She had that look, not just exhaustion, but the kind that settles in a person who's always had to brace for the worst. I saw it in her posture, in the way she never fully unpacked her few belongings, like she was always ready to leave again. I told her she didn't have to run anymore, that this place was hers. I wasn't just giving her shelter, I was giving her what I had craved all those nights in that basement: safety. One afternoon, I found the boys sitting out back, playing with scraps of wood they had found by the alley. They were trying to build something, a birdhouse maybe, with a cracked hammer and nails that bent before going in. I helped them finish it. Took the time to sand it smooth, paint it blue. When we hung it up and saw a sparrow land inside, they looked at me like I was a magician. That little project meant more to me than anything I'd done in years, because they saw me, not as a burden, not as someone who needed managing, just as a man who wanted to help. But peace never lasts long when others feel entitled to your pain. The SUV kept showing up, sometimes closer, always watching. Then came the photo, then the tires. It was escalating, and I knew who it was, even if I couldn't prove it yet. I told Lisa to keep her boys inside after dark. Started walking the perimeter at night, flashlight in hand, phone in my pocket, always ready to hit record. That's when I realized I couldn't just protect my own peace. I had to protect theirs too. I reached out to my lawyer again, told him I wanted to get serious, that I needed to make sure they couldn't come near me, legally or financially. He didn't hesitate. We started drafting documents, not just the basics. We locked down every account, redrafted my will, removed names, added trustees, and created a trust in Lisa's name for when the boys were grown. Because I had something worth protecting again, and I wasn't going to let it be taken. When you're finally free, the worst thing you can do is forget the cage you escaped from. I wasn't angry anymore. I wasn't bitter. I was sharp, focused, ready. So I bought cameras. Front porch, back alley, side fence, one facing the street. My lawyer made sure everything was logged and registered, admissible, clean. I also started a notebook, dates, times, license plates, patterns, every voicemail, every suspicious package. I treated it like a job. Because in a way, it was. They weren't just trying to scare me. They were trying to pull me back into the silence. But they didn't realize something important. This time, I wasn't alone, and I wasn't afraid. I always thought starting over at my age was a fantasy, something people said when they didn't know what else to say. But sitting on that porch, watching two boys paint stones for the garden, while their mother finally stopped flinching at loud noises, I realized I hadn't just escaped. I'd been reborn. This place wasn't fancy. The walls needed paint. The gutters sagged. The backyard was mostly dirt. But it was ours. No one told me what I could eat or where I could walk or when I could speak. And for the first time in a long time, I had something better than comfort. I had purpose. Every morning, I made coffee and sat outside as the sun rose. Sometimes the kids would wake early and sit with me, wrapped in old blankets, asking if they could help in the garden or build something new. We planted flowers in old cans, fixed up a broken lawn chair. The laughter was small, unpolished, but real. The kind you don't fake. Lisa had started smiling too. Not every day, but it was happening. You could see it in the way she folded the laundry a little slower, or how she left the windows open to let in the breeze. I didn't pry into her past, but I knew pain when I saw it. And I saw a woman trying hard to be whole again, for her boys, and maybe for herself. I told her once, late one evening as we sat on the porch, that she and the boys had saved me more than I'd saved them. She looked away, quiet, then said something I'll never forget. "We were drowning. You gave us a dock." She didn't say thank you. She didn't need to. But even in that piece, I kept one eye open. The SUV had stopped showing up. The mail stayed clean. The cameras hadn't caught anything in weeks. On the surface, it seemed like they had given up, but I knew better. People like that don't stop. They plot, they regroup, they wait. And sure enough, the calm ended with a knock I didn't hear. Lisa called me, voice tense. "She's here." I stepped out the front door, and there she was, on the porch, folder in hand, fire in her eyes. She didn't come to apologize, she came to take control. She handed me the papers, a petition for guardianship. She was trying to claim I wasn't mentally stable, said I was being manipulated, that I had cut off family ties under suspicious influence. I looked her in the eye. She wouldn't meet mine. I opened the folder, legal language, sworn statements, claims of confusion, depression, instability. Lisa stood behind me, barely breathing. I could feel her trembling. She wasn't just worried about me. She knew this was the kind of thing that could destroy everything we'd built, the kind of accusation people whisper about, even after it's cleared. They weren't coming after me anymore. They were coming after us. I asked one question. "Do you really believe I'm not in my right mind? Or is this about the money?" She said nothing, just turned, walked back to her car, and drove off. I didn't follow, didn't yell, didn't even curse. I just stood there, heart beating like a drum in my chest, and realized the next phase of this fight had begun. But I wasn't the man in the basement anymore. I had a home. I had people counting on me. I had legal protection, cameras, documents, and most importantly, I had truth. So I walked back inside, sat at the table with Lisa and her boys, and told them everything. They weren't scared. They were ready, because they knew what I had learned the hard way. When someone tries to treat you like property, like a burden, like a silent piece of furniture, you don't run. You build, you prepare. And when they come for you again, you make sure they regret ever thinking you were weak. Once someone sees you as an asset instead of a person, they never stop trying to claim you. That's what I learned. Their version of love had conditions. Loyalty meant control. And now that I'd taken back my life, they wanted it back, not because they missed me, but because I had something they believed they were owed. A few days after the guardianship stunt, I was out front watering the lawn when a familiar car pulled up. He got out like nothing had happened, like we were about to catch up over coffee. Arms wide, fake smile. The same charm he used when neighbors came by, or when he was trying to hide something. "We need to talk," he said. I didn't respond. He stepped closer, lowered his voice. "I get it, you're pissed, but we're family." I looked at him, dead in the eye, and said nothing. Then he dropped the act. "I know you've been making moves. Trusts, lawyers, wills. That's cute, but you're not in your right mind, and we're going to prove it. Depression, isolation. Remember those texts you sent after she died?" He smirked. He enjoyed saying it. "You're leaving everything to some stray woman with bastard kids. Think that's what your wife would have wanted?" That broke something in me. Not because he insulted me, but because he insulted the only people who'd shown me kindness since she died. The people who offered love with no strings, who never made me ask permission to exist. I told him to leave. He didn't. So I stepped back into the house and locked the door. 5 minutes later, I was on the phone with my lawyer. He told me to document everything. Again, said it was time to shift from defense to offense. He helped me start the restraining order process. We printed photos, saved voicemails, time-stamped every visit and threat. He made it clear. This wasn't just about protecting my money anymore, it was about protecting my name. Then came the next low blow. Child Protective Services showed up at my door. Someone, guess who, had reported Lisa, said she was exposing her kids to a dangerous elderly man with a history of suicidal behavior. Claimed she was unfit, that I was being exploited. They searched the home, asked the boys strange questions, took photos of the pantry, the bedrooms, even our garden tools. Lisa cried when they left, not because of what they saw, there was nothing wrong, but because of what they suggested, because someone had used our healing against us. I sat with her that night and said the only thing I could. We're not letting them win. The CPS case was closed in 2 days. No cause for concern, but the damage was done. The boys were shaken. Lisa couldn't sleep. I felt the old anger creeping back, but I didn't let it take over. I turned it into fuel. That week, my lawyer and I got serious. We compiled everything, every voicemail, every message, every incident. But I needed more. So I hired a private investigator. Cost me $6,000, but I figured if they wanted a war, I'd bring proof. What he found was worse than I expected. Rick, because let's stop pretending he's just the husband, had opened a credit card in my name, used my social security number, spent nearly $8,000 on electronics, meals, even part of that Myrtle Beach trip. The bills were sent to a P.O. box I didn't know about. Fraud, plain and simple. We froze the account, filed a police report, and handed everything over to the court. The conservatorship case dropped. Their lawyer wanted nothing to do with it anymore. But I wasn't done. I filed a civil suit against Rick for financial fraud and emotional abuse. We included everything: the vault, the pantry locks, the CPS stunt, the slashed tires, even the dead bird I found on my porch with a broken neck, left like a warning. I added statements from neighbors, from Lisa, from the kids. My lawyer said the case was solid, and just like that, the power shifted. Because truth, once it's laid out in the open, becomes armor. And I wasn't hiding anymore. After the lawsuit was filed, the silence was eerie. No more surprise visits, no letters, no late-night drive-bys. Even the SUV vanished. But I wasn't naive. That kind of quiet doesn't mean surrender. It means they're planning something worse. Then the final punch came. A letter from the court. She had filed for financial conservatorship, claimed I was no longer mentally fit to manage my affairs, included a copy of an email I had written to her after my wife died, back when I was still in the thick of grief. It said, "Some days I don't know why I'm still here. I just want to sleep and not wake up." It wasn't a suicide note. It was raw honesty, the kind people only share when they think they're safe. But she weaponized it. She told the court I was suicidal, vulnerable, being manipulated by a woman with no relation and questionable background. She even called Lisa a predator in the paperwork. The irony of it almost made me laugh if it didn't make me sick first. I had 30 days to respond before the court could appoint an investigator to assess my mental state. Lisa was crushed, not because she feared being judged, but because she felt responsible. "I didn't mean to get you into this," she whispered. I told her the truth. "You didn't. They did." I knew then I couldn't just defend myself anymore. I had to go on the offensive. For good. I had been planning for this. The moment Rick had threatened to challenge my will, I'd started collecting everything. My lawyer and I had a full binder by then, emails, texts, photos, recordings, and logs from the security cameras. Even the note I left before I disappeared, we titled it, "Why They'll Never Touch My Money Again," but we didn't stop there. The private investigator came through again. Turns out Rick's business, a shady consulting firm, was already under scrutiny. 3 civil complaints, one from a woman who said he charged her twice for the same strategy session, another from a veteran who paid Rick $5,000 for a promised government contract that never existed. It was all smoke and mirrors, and when we dug into their finances, it all made sense. He had borrowed heavily against their house. They were deep in debt. Drowning. They didn't miss me. They missed what they thought I was worth. We gathered sworn statements from neighbors, from Lisa, from local officials who'd seen Rick lurking, even from the kid who mowed the lawn across the street and remembered seeing someone with a limp the night my tires were slashed. We handed everything to the court, and just like that, her case fell apart. Her lawyer dropped her. Too much liability. That should have been the end. But there was still a phone call. She cried. Said she didn't know Rick was doing all that. Said she never meant for things to go this far. "I was just scared," she said. "I thought you were throwing everything away." I asked her one question. "Why didn't you stop him the day he locked the food?" She went quiet. Then I said what had been boiling inside me for months. "You stirred soup while he made me ask permission to eat." She sobbed. I hung up. It didn't feel good. It didn't feel bad. It just felt necessary. A few months later, the court ruled in my favor. The judge signed the restraining order against Rick. He was ordered to pay damages. His business crumbled. Word got around. Once a fraud is exposed, people don't forget. 6 months later, I received a letter from her. No envelope, just my name on it. She was filing for divorce. Said she finally saw it. I didn't reply. I wasn't angry. I wasn't even bitter. I just didn't owe her anything anymore. Not after everything. Some people don't realize they're hurting you until they lose you. Others don't care either way. But what matters is this. I remembered who I was, and I never let them take that from me again. After the ruling, something in me shifted. Not relief exactly, but a quiet kind of certainty. For the first time in a long time, I knew I was standing on solid ground, legally, emotionally, and spiritually. They had tried everything: manipulation, shame, legal ambush, even lies twisted from my own grief. And still, I stood. But this wasn't just about winning a case. It was about closing a door, firmly, permanently, with no way back in. I wanted to make sure they could never come near me again. Not just physically, but financially. So my lawyer and I worked through every detail. We rewrote every document, reassigned every point of power, removed every clause they might try to exploit. We named a third-party trustee to oversee everything, Power of attorney, gone, health proxy, transferred, every dollar accounted for, every future protected. And then we built something else, a trust. Not for myself, for Lisa's boys. Because sometimes family isn't who shares your blood. It's who shares your burdens and refuses to let you carry them alone. I'd seen how little they had, watched how hard she worked just to make ends meet. Those kids didn't ask for any of this, and yet they smiled, helped in the garden, shared their fruit snacks when they saw I hadn't eaten lunch. That trust wasn't just money, it was a promise that someone believed in them, that they mattered. Then, just when I thought the dust was settling, the past came crawling one last time. Rick showed up, middle of the day, no shame, no hesitation, pulled right into the driveway like we were old friends. I was watering the garden. He didn't knock, didn't wait, just walked up and said, "Hey, let's talk." I didn't reply. He stepped closer, voice low. "I know what you've done. You think you've locked everything down? We're contesting all of it. The will, the house, everything. You're not in your right mind. You've got a history. Depression, remember?" He smiled like he was making a deal, like we were two men trading chips in a poker game. But I wasn't playing anymore. I stepped back, went inside, locked the door. Then I called my lawyer. Again. He told me what I already knew. This was going to get ugly before it got better. So I kept documenting. The visit, the threat, the limp, the camera footage. We submitted it all. 3 days later, a neighbor spotted someone sneaking around my car late at night. Hoodie, limpio. Just like before. That same pattern, that same cowardice. And then, like something out of a movie, I found it. A dead bird, left on the porch, wings folded, neck broken. A message. But this time, the cameras caught it. Clear as day. Time-stamped, stored, filed. The police took it seriously. They paid Rick a visit. And just like that, the game changed. We had leverage now. Real, legal weight. But I didn't want revenge. I wanted peace. Still, I wasn't going to ignore what happened. So we filed. A civil suit. Comprehensive, aggressive, fraud, emotional distress, identity theft. We brought every piece of dirt we had, his fake business, the credit card scam, the CPS stunt, the guardianship abuse, and the threats. We had statements, footage, testimony, a full report from a licensed private investigator. They had nothing but excuses. Dana tried to step away, said she didn't know the full extent of what he was doing, that she had just been scared, that she never meant to hurt me. I asked her one last question, quiet, direct. "When did you start watching your husband treat me like a stray dog and decide that was okay?" She had no answer, because the truth is, silence is a choice too, and hers had cost us everything. A few months later, the judgment came through. Rick was ordered to pay damages. His consulting firm collapsed. He tried to rebuild it under another name. Didn't matter. Word spreads fast when the mask slips. Dana filed for divorce. I didn't answer her letter, because some doors, once closed, should never be reopened. Instead, I gave the duplex to Lisa, signed the deed in her name. She cried so hard she couldn't speak. The boys hugged me like I was theirs, and in that moment I knew they were mine too. Not by blood, by choice, by respect, by love. And that made all the difference. The day I left Kentucky, the sun was just beginning to rise. I packed light. A few clothes, some old photos, and a carved wooden birdhouse the boys insisted I take. Lisa stood by the door, eyes red but smiling. The boys hugged me hard, one on each side. I told them to protect their mom, always. That being strong doesn't mean being loud. It means doing the right thing even when no one is watching. I handed Lisa the last set of keys. The house was hers now. Every wall, every creaky floorboard, every bit of safety she'd helped me build. She earned it. Not because she paid, but because she showed up when no one else did. Because she never once made me feel like a burden. I didn't look back when I drove away. Some endings don't need a second glance. I headed west, settled in a small town in Missouri, a place with a diner that still serves coffee in chipped mugs, and a post office that knows you by name. My new house is small, nothing fancy. A porch swing, a tiny garden in the back, just enough room for peace. I joined the local VFW, started walking dogs at the shelter on weekends. Sometimes I volunteer at the library, reading to kids whose parents work late. None of them know my past. They don't need to. Here, I'm just the guy who tells a good story and brings donuts on Thursdays. Some nights I sit outside and watch the birds. The wind here carries no tension, no weight, just air, clean and open. Sometimes I think about Dana, not with anger, just with distance. I miss the little girl who used to fall asleep on my chest, ask me if birds ever get tired of flying. That version of her is long gone, buried under choices she made and silences she let linger. Grief can change a person. I understand that. But it doesn't excuse cruelty. It doesn't erase what she allowed to happen. And it definitely doesn't obligate me to open my door again. Rick? He's out there somewhere, licking wounds he caused himself. Last I heard, he tried launching another company under a different name. Doesn't matter. The world has a way of remembering the truth, even if it takes time. I didn't move to escape. I moved to breathe, to stop surviving and start living again. Because I learned something in that basement, in that motel, in that courtroom. Respect is worth more than blood. Peace is worth more than inheritance. And love, real love, doesn't come with strings, locks, or silence. They tried to shrink me down to nothing, to make me feel like my value ended when I stopped being useful to them. But I found out the truth. I was never the problem. I was just inconvenient to people who couldn't see past their own needs. Now I live simply. I grow tomatoes. I mend fences. I tell stories to kids who laugh with their whole lungs. I fall asleep knowing no one's keeping track of how much food I eat or how often I use the bathroom. Freedom isn't loud. It's quiet, gentle. It's the first bite of a hot meal you didn't have to ask for. The sound of laughter through a thin wall from people who are safe because you chose to be brave. That's what I fought for. Not revenge. Just the right to exist with dignity. So if anyone asks what happened to the old man who disappeared after his family turned on him, tell them this. He didn't disappear. He just remembered who he was. And once he did, nothing could ever make him small again. For anyone who's ever been made to feel like a burden. If you've ever been made to feel like you're too much or not enough. If someone made you believe you didn't deserve respect, a warm meal, or a room without a lock on the outside, let this be your reminder. You are not invisible. You are not weak. And you are never alone. You have the right to live with dignity. You have the right to walk away from what hurts you. You have the right to rebuild your life, even if others don't want you to. If you're standing in the silence between love and harm, unsure whether staying means survival or surrender, this is your sign. Choose yourself, even if it's one small step, even if it's quiet. Believe this. There are still people out there who will see you not for what you can do for them, but for who you are. And if you've ever been a victim like I was, you now have the power to become someone else's hope. We weren't born to be burdens. We were born to love, to live, and to be free. If this story touched something inside you, share it. Someone out there might need these exact words to find their way back to themselves. They almost made me forget who I was. But I reminded myself, now it's your turn.